The Transformers franchise has spent 40 years building a mythology around objects that reshape entire worlds. These are the 10 most important, ranked from powerful to the one that holds the entire franchise's cosmology together. Let's break this down. Enigma of Combination. Solus Prime built it for Nexus Prime, and the intent embedded in its design was philosophical rather than purely mechanical. The Enigma was not created to make Cybertronians stronger in the most straightforward sense, but to inject the element of unpredictability into a civilization that, left to its own ordered nature, would never produce the creative instability necessary for genuine change. Termagax, the aligned continuities' foremost scholar of Prime artifacts, described it as Primus's deliberate introduction of chaos into a world that would otherwise remain forever ordered. What this philosophy produced in practice was a device capable of merging any combination of Cybertronians into a combiner form regardless of prior configuration, not through surgical enhancement or engineering, but through a supernatural convergence that bypassed the physical requirements entirely. The IDW Combiner Wars arc built its entire structure around what happens when an artifact designed to create unity and cooperation becomes the contested resource in a conflict between combiners, the Council of Worlds, and individual Transformers, all pursuing incompatible uses for the same object. Devastator trying to claim it, Victorian wielding it, Trypticon swallowing it, and using its absorbed power to control every other combiner simultaneously. The Enigma at the center of each escalation, passing between factions like a philosophical argument that everyone understood differently. Megatronus eventually claimed it alongside the Matrix and the Requiem Blaster to build a doomsday device, which was the most honest possible destination for a tool explicitly designed to combine things. The Fallen took it to its logical conclusion: Requiem Blaster. Solus Prime built it, and the first person to fire it accidentally killed her. The Requiem Blaster is the most consequential weapon in the aligned continuity's history, not because of the targets it destroyed, but because of the relationship it destroyed in the Age of the 13. Megatronus commissioned it from Solus, his closest companion among the original 13 primes, and during the weapon's earliest operational test, it discharged and struck her. Whether this was accident or the beginning of Megatronus's betrayal remains the most debated detail of the artifact's origin, because the franchise left the precise circumstances deliberately ambiguous. What was not ambiguous was the result. Solus Prime was dead, Megatronus was sealed in a dimensional prison for the killing, and the Requiem Blaster was hidden away in the Rust Sea to prevent anyone from accessing a weapon that had just killed one of the most powerful beings Primus had ever created. It eventually became the gravitational center of Junkion. The entire planetoid had coalesced around the blaster's resting place, meaning that Junkion is functionally a planet built around the artifact most associated with the worst act in the franchise's mythological history. Megatronus recovered it in the IDW Combiner Wars arc and combined it with the Enigma and the Matrix to build a device capable of draining the spark from every living Transformer simultaneously. The weapon that accidentally killed its creator was being repurposed to kill everyone the creator had ever built anything for. Blades of Time. Vector Prime was their keeper. The Blades of Time are the rarest category of artifact in the franchise's mythology, the object that was never extensively contested, never changed hands through combat, never became the focal point of a faction war, because the being who carried them was the only one who understood their function well enough to use them. Vector Prime was the appointed guardian of time and space among the original 13 primes, the member of that group whose purpose was specifically maintenance of the temporal and dimensional architecture that allowed the multiverse to function coherently. His personal weapons were appropriate to that function. The Blades of Time allowed manipulation of time itself, and in the aligned continuity's cosmological conclusion, Vector Prime used them to construct a time loop around Unicron when conventional force had failed to destroy the Chaos Bringer. The loop locked Unicron in permanent stasis, not killed, not weakened, not imprisoned in a conventional sense, but caught in a repeating temporal circuit that prevented any further action. The distinction matters because it is the clearest demonstration in the franchise of what a time-based artifact can accomplish that any other weapon category cannot. Unicron cannot be destroyed by conventional means. Vector Prime did not try to destroy him. He built a cage from time itself and closed the door. The blades accomplished something the Requiem Blaster, the Star Saber, and the Matrix combined could not guarantee: permanent cessation without destruction, containment without confrontation. Star Saber. Primi wielded it first, and the matrix of leadership was its jewel. The Star Saber is the personal weapon of the first Autobot leader, Prima, the inaugural bearer of the Matrix among the original 13 Primes, which means it is simultaneously a sword, a historical artifact of the Autobot faction's founding, and a vessel for the Matrix's power in a physical combat form. In the aligned continuities Transformers Prime storyline, Optimus Prime recovered the Star Saber from the Primal Swamp, where it had been sealed since the Age of Primes, and the weapon immediately established its significance by granting him knowledge of the Omega Keys. The information was contained within the blade's connection to the Prime legacy, accessible only to a worthy bearer. Megatron's response to Optimus acquiring the Star Saber was to amputate the arm of the deceased Liege Maximo from his body and graft it to his own frame specifically to access the Forge of Solus Prime, because the only answer to a weapon of that caliber was another weapon of that caliber. The Star Saber's most consequential moment in the series came not in a battle against Megatron, but in the destruction of the Omega Lock. Optimus Prime used the sword to shatter the device that could have cyberformed Earth, rather than allow Megatron to do so, trading Cybertron's restoration for Earth's survival. The weapon of the first Autobot leader was used by the last to make a choice that the first never would have faced: Forge of Solus Prime. The power source at its heart is the equivalent of a collapsing neutron star. Not metaphorically, the Forge of Solus Prime operates through the convergence of what the franchise describes as magic and science simultaneously, and the supernatural force that animates it, the Flame of Solus Prime, carries energy output comparable to stellar collapse. It is, by any engineering standard, the most powerful manufacturing tool ever created, because a forge powered by that energy input can theoretically make anything from anything, with the only limiting factor being the knowledge and skill of the Prime wielding it. Solus Prime was the artificer of the original 13, the member of that group whose function was creation in its most literal sense, whose purpose was building the artifacts that the other 12 would wield in the campaign against Unicron. The Forge built the Matrix. The Forge built the Enigma. The Forge built the Star Saber. Every other artifact on this list, except those that predate the 13 entirely, was produced by this hammer. In Transformers Prime, it was eventually sent to Earth in the hope that Optimus would find it. Megatron found it first, then discovered he could not access its power, because the Forge recognized a Prime's touch, and Megatron was not one. When the Autobots finally claimed it, Smokescreen used its remaining energy to revive a dying Optimus Prime, which was the Forge doing the last thing it was built to do, sustaining the life of a Prime when nothing else could. Predaking shattered it subsequently. The tool that built everything was destroyed by something it had never anticipated: Covenant of Primus. AlphaTrion did not write it. He was given it already containing text he could not fully read. When AlphaTrion first opened the Covenant among the original 13, words were already present inside. Histories of events that had not yet occurred, prophecies written in languages that would not exist for millions of years, passages in scripts no Cybertronian yet spoke, and therefore no Cybertronian could interpret. Primus had etched portions of it electrolytically before AlphaTrion ever held the quill. The artifact assigned to AlphaTrion among the 13 was not a blank book waiting to be filled, but a record that had already been partially completed by its creator before the person tasked with completing it had been built. The quill, a reality-bending writing instrument also granted by Primus, allowed AlphaTrion to add to the Covenant's contents, to record the history he observed as it unfolded, and in limited circumstances to alter the future it described, though only within parameters the franchise never fully defined. The Covenant chronicled everything: the Age of the 13, the Golden Age, the rise of Megatron, the Civil War, the exile of both factions from Cybertron, and events still to come. Its prophecy of the 47 spheres aligning identified Unicron's reawakening. Centuries before Transformers Prime depicted it, Megatron believed the rising darkness referred to him, which was both incorrect and completely consistent with his character. AlphaTrion used it to seed the Iacon artifacts across multiple worlds ahead of the Decepticons finding them, making the Covenant not just a historical record, but the strategic intelligence document that preserved every other artifact on this list from Decepticon control. Vector Sigma. It predates the Transformer race. Vector Sigma is described as existing before Cybertron civilization had formed, a supercomputer of incalculable processing power that served as the internal computational architecture of Primus himself, connected to the AllSpark dimension from which all Cybertronian life emerged, used by Primus to analyze cosmic events through information gathered from the sonic canyons. The franchise used it across 4 decades as the most consistent answer to the question of where Transformer life came from when the AllSpark was unavailable. Vector Sigma could create new sparks, imbue protoforms with personality and function, and serve as a direct conduit to the wellspring of Cybertronian consciousness. It activated through a specific key that turned organic matter into metal, an activation requirement that Shockwave, in the War for Cybertron game continuity, called the Omega Key, and that the G1 cartoon depicted Alpha Trion sacrificing himself to replicate. The condition for using the universe's most powerful life-giving computer was destroying something organic. In the G1 cartoon's Japanese continuity, Optimus Prime merged with Vector Sigma to stabilize it when the Matrix's absence caused it to destabilize, which meant the Transformer most responsible for protecting life sacrificed himself to the computer that generated it. 300 years after the G1 War's end, Vector Sigma evolved beyond its physical form entirely and became the Oracle, the transcendent intelligence that guided Beast Machines' Optimus Primal through visions he could not fully interpret, toward a restoration of Cybertron that required him to understand what his predecessor had built before he could continue building on top of it. Omega Lock. Megatron blew up the Autobot base because Optimus destroyed it. That specific chain of causation, one action producing the retaliatory action that ended Season 2 of Transformers Prime, describes the Omega Lock's narrative function more efficiently than any technical specification. The device was built to cyberform planets, converting entire worlds from their natural composition into a Cybertronian landscape capable of hosting and fueling the Transformer civilization. Megatron's plan was to use it on Earth, which would have transformed the planet's surface into metal and killed every organic creature on it as a side effect of making Cybertron's civilization sustainable elsewhere. Optimus Prime destroyed the Omega Lock with the Star Saber rather than allow that outcome, which eliminated the one available mechanism for restoring Cybertron at the same time as it protected Earth. The decision cost the Autobots their base in Megatron's retaliatory strike and cost Optimus his life in the short term, producing Season 3's entire premise from a single irreversible choice. The Omega Lock's 4 Omega Keys had been the season's primary contested resource, the Decepticons and Autobots spending the majority of Season 2 tracking them down across multiple continents, which made the sequence where Optimus destroyed the assembled device the franchise's most consequential single action of the aligned continuities' entire run. He traded the tool that could have ended the war and restored their world to protect a planet that was not his. The Omega Lock is on this list not for what it was, but for what its destruction produced. AllSpark. It is the source. In the Bayverse, it is a cube so large it dwarfs buildings that eventually compresses to football size through Bumblebee's intervention. In the animated continuity, it is a sphere launched into space to end the war because possession of it was the war's entire cause. In the aligned continuity, it is the collective consciousness of every Transformer spark that ever lived or ever will live, housed in a container Alpha Trion built specifically to launch it beyond Megatron's reach. In the G1 cartoon's extended mythology, it is the dimension to which all Cybertronian sparks return upon death, and from which all new sparks emerge, the afterlife and the birthplace simultaneously, the system that makes Transformer death meaningful because it is not an ending, but a return. In the Bayverse's first film, it could turn any technology into a living Transformer on contact, vending machines, cell phones, power lines, which meant the most sacred object in Cybertronian history was also the most indiscriminate creation engine imaginable. In every continuity, the war between Autobots and Decepticons began because of it, escalated because of it, and was ultimately resolved in relationship to it. Megatron's desire to control it was the motivating force behind his initial rebellion. Optimus's decision to launch it into space was the Autobots' most consequential pre-series action. Sam Witwicky plunged it into Megatron's chest in 2007 because it was the only thing in reach. The AllSpark is the franchise's most universal artifact because every continuity needs a reason for the war, and the war always comes back to the source of life. Matrix of leadership. It is Primus's own life force in a hollow metal shell. Every other artifact on this list was built by someone, by Solus Prime, by Asmuth, by the engineering intelligence of the 13 primes working in concert. The Matrix was made by Primus from himself, which means the object that Optimus Prime carries in his chest and opens in moments of existential crisis is a fragment of the god who built the species, crystallized and handed down through successive generations of leaders as the most direct possible connection between the franchise's creator deity and the beings he created. It cures the hate plague. It stops Unicron, the Matrix being the one artifact Unicron feared across every continuity, the specific thing that the planet-eating Chaos God would not approach, because Primus's creative force in concentrated form is the only thing that meaningfully counters pure destruction. Hot Rod opened it in 1986, and the light that came out killed Unicron and turned him into Rodimus Prime. The franchise did not plan for Hot Rod to be carrying it. Megatron was supposed to. The toy line changed the story. The death of Optimus Prime, the passing of the Matrix, the franchise's single most iconic moment, caused by a business decision that the creative team built mythology around after the fact, and the mythology became real enough that the Primus-created artifact at the center of it has now been part of the franchise's cosmological foundation for 4 decades. It lives inside Optimus Prime's chest. When he opens it, Primus reaches into the present from the moment of creation and addresses whatever is threatening his children. The war always ends at the Matrix.